Hello everyone, my name of course is Resonant and welcome back to another video. Now today we have a Bannerlord interview. This is an exclusive interview on an up and coming mod for Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord. Now I just want to stress once again, because some people don't quite understand this in the comments, Mount and Blade Bannerlord 2 is not actually out yet. I've had a lot of issues with people saying, can I download this mod already? No, you can't. This is just some ideas, and this mod will be coming out in Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord when it is released, hopefully. So I'm here with Vitalian, who was also one of the main leaders of the March of Rome community. You might remember a long time ago I did some March of Rome videos. Hello, Vitalian.
Hello. Hello, I'm Vitalian, your friendly neighborhood head developer.
Okay, so would you like to give a quick or an explanation or introduction into the mod that you're going to be doing for Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord?
Yeah, so Ghal Maraz, as it's been dubbed and now officially called, is going to be a single and multiplayer mod for Bannerlord set in Warhammer Fantasy. Very, very much sort of tied in with the lore heavily, obviously, but also Total War Warhammer, that people will be a lot more familiar with. Specifically, it will be set in the year 2519 IC, which is their yearing system. So for those of you up on your Warhammer Fantasy lore, this will begin at the beginning of the end times. So as fantasy is winding down. So yeah, that's the general vague introduction to it.
Okay, so obviously it's going to be set in the Warhammer Fantasy sort of era. You did mention that it is going to be single and multiplayer. What kind of new features, or if you've kind of worked them out yet, will you be adding into the multiplayer to make it stand out as a multiplayer mod as well?
Well, when sort of thinking of how to do the multiplayer aspect of it, one of the things that we'd have to do to make it unique and tie in with Warhammer Fantasy lore is in normal. Not so much deathmatch, but certainly battle, and well, not capture the flag or anything like that. But a team versus team games, we'd like to include siege weaponry, not only in the siege game mode. So, if people are familiar with Warhammer Fantasy, there should and hopefully will be things like cannons, mortars.
Are you going to be putting in some goblin divers?
Oh, Christ, don't start me. It's already been I've had long conversations with people on Steam demanding that I put in like goblin divers.
Please put them in.
Well, with Bannerlord being in C, I think it's C#, the coding format, and with myself and some prospective coders being familiar with the C coding formats, I'm hesitant to say this to get people excited, but putting in controllable projectiles that people actually control.
More of a hope at the moment that you'll be...
It's more of a hope. I mean, we really do have to wait until Bannerlord's released to see the in-depths of the system and what we can work with, but a lot more hope for in-field artillery than Warband. Even though mods like Napoleonic Wars do have cannons, it should be a lot easier and cleaner in Bannerlord to do.
Alright, so obviously you're developing this mod, but as a more personal question, as yourself, what would you say your strengths are in the developing? Are you more of a coder, making textures and stuff like that? What do you say your strengths are in your team?
Nowadays, it's coding.
Right.
The recent revival of MOR, I've been the coder.
Yeah.
But I'm a asset designer, team leader. I do some minor texturing work every now and again. Things like forum art, stuff like that. But it's now also sole coder.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So in regards to, you've been talking a lot about the Warhammer Fantasy lore. In regards to that, how accurate are you trying to make it to the lore, or you're going to go off in your sort of tangent so you can add things in that maybe aren't technically in the actual lore of Warhammer Fantasy, but what you think would be cool adding it in, or are you going to try and stick strictly to the actual lore of Warhammer?
We won't be looking to add things that aren't in Warhammer lore. Going off on our own tangent would obviously make things far more unique than just sitting with Warhammer Fantasy itself. But you run into the the occasion, like if I was someone playing this mod and I found out
People
that it
might
wasn't
complain.
actually accurate to Warhammer Fantasy and I was a big fan of it, I'd want to lynch myself.
Of course, that's just what every Mount and
obviously,
Blade.
yeah. I mean, yeah. If I go into a Warhammer Fantasy battle and chaos demons on in there that are 12 stories tall, I'm going to be a little bit pissed off.
Don't get me started on Mount and Blade players and their wish for historical accuracy. If there's something that isn't slightly historically accurate, they will just go on a massive rant. May it be in a mod or in one of my videos. If someone sees something or I say something that isn't spot on historically accurate, they'll write a paragraph and I'll know about it.
Yeah, I'd never want to do a historical mod again in the Warband community. I'm not bashing it, but holy shit, you get one helmet wrong and you are gone.
Yeah, so like I did actually mention at the start, Vitalian is actually a developer of the March of Rome mod for Mount and Blade Warband, which is a very good mod, and there are quite a lot of videos on my channel about it if you want to go and check that out.
Good videos, do check it out.
So if you do want to see the kind of stuff that Vitalian and his team can do, then you can have a look at those videos.
Anyway, yeah, back on topic. In terms of accuracy, it's more of a question of what we can put in that the Bannerlord engine will allow. Obviously, all foot soldiers will be included. We've already got full designs, assets, and models of the Empire State Troopers. So sort of your normal run-of-the-mill infantry. Stuff like artillery, etc. will do to coincide with the new artillery engines that are coming with Bannerlord. That's all fine. At a more of a push, flying monsters, or I say flying monsters, like flying mounts. I'll be looking into how you can do stuff like Pegasus mounts and like flying demons and things like that. Won't put them in if they're basic versions. We want to really polish them off and make them look good before they're put in. But
just saying that is making me think back to like the dragons and things in Full Invasion 2.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying there is you don't want just like a static thing just moving sliding around in the sky. You want a polished animated thing.
Yeah, it won't be a Lord of the Rings Nazgul that floats 1 foot off the ground. So
I think I've got a screenshot on my Steam profile of literally just about 50 helicopters just all merged into each other in Full Invasion 2 in Helm's Deep. It's just insane.
The Full Invasion 2 is good. They really did revolutionise a lot of stuff. But so we really want to polish that off and make, instead of you staying at one level of flight or just above the ground or really high in the air, we want you to sort of be able to go in
bit more freedom.
360 degrees effectively with very crisp animations.
Of course.
Giants, with word on the rumor mill being that skeletons will be a lot, the player skeleton will be a lot easier to manipulate in Bannerlord. Certainly in single player, we'd like to include things like giants, which are a staple of certainly the orc and chaos armies. And also, you if you want to be a beastman or if you want to be a goblin or if especially a dwarf, massive pro dwarf fandom out there that have been bullying me to make them the first faction available in the game. But we want to be able to do stuff like that. Okay. So whatever the Bannerlord engine will let us do, we will do it.
Yeah. So still talking about the Bannerlord engine, you did just mention that apparently you'll be able to manipulate the bone structure a bit better to get different sizes.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we've been told or that you think or hope will be in the modding tools for Bannerlord? Because obviously they've said that modders will have a lot more freedom in the new game. Is there any other sort of mechanics or tools that you want to be able to use to make it very different to mechanics and things that you can't actually use in Warband? Because obviously you have developed Warband mods before, so you know the limitations of the engine for Warband and the modding tools for that. Is there anything else that they're going to be adding in which you hope you'll be able to utilize to make it a more unique mod?
In terms of what they're adding, I have no clue, obviously, because Tailworlds being Tailworlds, they've been extremely quiet on literally everything to do with Bannerlord. The one blog every 8 years isn't really cutting the mustard in terms of
very true.
In terms of what, and they haven't actually addressed sort of modding in particular, as saying aside from saying it will be much easier to mod, and rumors going around that once again the skeleton will be easy to manipulate. One thing that I am hoping to do with the introduction of the C# system in Bannerlord is people may raise an eyebrow at this, and it's been done in Warband to certain degrees, but tanks.
Ooh.
People with like tanks in Warhammer Fantasy. Steam tank is what I was thinking.
Steam tanks,
not multi-man steam tanks. It would just obviously be one person in it, but the ability to actually be in a steam tank and move it around and shoot the main cannon out the front of it is something we'd like to do with the Bannerlord engine.
Mm-hmm.
So C# is a very flexible coding language.
Something it might have been Captain Nuss or Frank Elliott that mentioned it. I can't remember who mentioned it, but there was something about how in Bannerlord they wanted to make modding so you didn't have to use a horse kind of skin and then just put a skin on top of that, because a lot of things in Warband, if you're like riding on like a Warg or a Nazgul or whatever, it's more making horse sounds and things like that. And I think they did mention that they kind of wanted to move away from that and get it so you can be able to make it its own entity sort of thing.
Well, it's not in Warband you can physically make things their own entity. It's just difficult to do. You can fresh code in different mounts, etc. But it's far easier to use the horse system and sounds, etc. And all you have to do is change the model and texture on it, and you have it. And you know the sit points and the size, etc. So you can already do that in Warband. But I think in Bannerlord, what people are looking forward to, especially in the modding community, is the ease at which you'll be able to do that. One of the big things that turns people off of coding in Warband is it's such a dated system. Not so much Python, but the files that you've got to work with. They made it easier in NW, because compiling it slightly more and putting it into English instead of numbers in some cases. But in Warband, it's difficult to find a specific bracket in the 18,000 lines of code in certain files. So it's difficult in Warband rather than impossible. It's exceptionally difficult to actually do things like that. But hopefully in Bannerlord it will be as simple as finding the file that contains mounts. And completely fresh coding it in C or the Bannerlord engine. Okay.
So going back to more of the lore, you have talked about how it's going to be really good for people that know the Warhammer lore.
Yeah.
How easy is it going to be for someone that doesn't know anything about Warhammer lore? Is it going to be something that will appeal to them to pick up? Is there anything in there introducing them into the lore? Because obviously there are a lot of people that love the Warhammer lore, but is it going to be easy for a non-Warhammer fan to be able to come into this mod and enjoy it?
It will, especially if you're joining off of the very off of version 1.0, which sort of links into our development plan, where we don't want to make it completely hardcore. This is just for people who know the lore. There'll be loads of different characters who won't, they won't explain their backstory to you. You just sort of have to automatically know it to enjoy the mod, etc. We're gonna, in terms of content we put in the game and storylines, another thing that has been briefly touched on in Bannerlord that we want to sort of include. We want to make it so it's almost a cross between Warhammer Total War, so that the simplicity of that, and the actual Warhammer Fantasy lore. So on the very surface of things, it will look similar to Warhammer Fantasy. So especially in version 1.0, there won't be millions of different troop types, with millions of different variations of equipment. There won't be really in-depth backstories to everything. There won't be loads and loads of characters. It will be quite a clean-cut version on the surface. But I think the deeper you cut and the more you play it, you'll find things that will be obviously entrenched in the lore, and then likely at the very bottom level you'll find there will be shout-outs to characters that only Warhammer lore fans will know. Like we were one of the specific things that I very much wanted to do for people who really help back the mod, and adding them as like tiny little side characters is in the Warhammer lore. Karl Franz, the Emperor of the Empire, has a personal champion called Schwarzhelm. He will be the time period of this mod coincides with the time period of one of the Warhammer Fantasies books. It's a large book. It's called The Emperor's Armies, which is about a chaos civil war in Aberland, and you'll see the characters from that book going around doing what they do from that book, or at least sort of a section of that. So there will be instances like that throughout the entirety of the old world to start off with, that only people who sort of really know the lore will understand. But if you don't know the lore at all, you'll be able to very easily sort of cut into it and get an idea of it, and then gradually submerge yourself in it if you don't know.
I mean, when Warhammer Total War Warhammer actually came out, I didn't know anything about Warhammer Fantasy. In fact, I used to, a long time ago, I was a lot into 40k, and I actually had a bit of a thing saying I don't really like the appeal of Warhammer Fantasy. But then as soon as Total War Warhammer came out, I've played a lot of the Total War games, and I picked that up, and now I literally don't care about 40k, and fantasy is kind of what I'm into now. So I guess you're hoping for the same kind of thing to happen.
Well, it's as a long-time fantasy fan, personally, I did actually have doubts about sort of Warhammer Total War, but that game coming out has really brought a lot of new people into the franchise. Sort of looking at the tabletop, it's all blocky. Well, when they did sell the tabletop, it's called Age of Sigmar now, which is.
I've heard a lot of hardcore Warhammer fans, fancy fans, against Age of Sigmar, but I quite like it.
Well, it's got the appeal of it being simple and easy to pick up.
I guess it's good for newcomers like me, just getting into it.
Yeah, to go in and sort of get used to it, and the models look nice. But as hardcore fantasy fans, and that was their original brand as well.
Yeah.
The fact that they scrapped it is just diabolical. Burn them. But yeah, it's the introduction of Warhammer Fantasy into the mainstream gaming media, especially in a simplified way that does also offer some perspective on the lore, but especially sort of in the simple, you have access to 2-3 dozen units or so. The particular faction has helped introduce a large number of people to Warhammer Fantasy. Like this idea of a Warhammer Fantasy mod for Bannerlord was being battered around before Warhammer Total War came out.
Yeah. And
the appeal wasn't there for people. Like people would, they were really keen on seeing sort of a persistent Shogunate mod or more stuff in Warband rather than, a planning ahead or like Lord of the Rings stuff, etc. But with the introduction of Warhammer Total War especially, the amount of people that have come up and said, no, do it, it'll be epic, do it, is really helped.
Yeah. So something we haven't actually addressed yet is the factions in your mod. So would you like to quickly explain how many factions there are and go through the factions, their advantages, their disadvantages, and what kind of people would want to play as these factions?
Well, to do that, I have to go through an introduction to sort of how we're going to do the single player.
Of course.
It won't be like Warsaw Conquest in Warband now. It won't encompass the entirety of the Warhammer Fantasy world. The first version, because of how large Bannerlord will be and how much has already been revealed and sort of how much is into it, everything down from to personalized weapons. Mm-hmm. Starting off small and gradually building is the way we're going to have to build it. Anyway, carrying on. A slow build into the mod will be far more beneficial than shooting for everything and releasing a game that encompasses the entirety of the old world, but it's very simple, or you're developing it for years and people losing hype. So what we're wanting to do is actually we took a page out of the Kingdoms of Arda mod, the Lord of the Rings mod that's coming out for Bannerlord.
Yeah.
They and now we are going to release a version. The single player campaign map to start off with is going to be very small. For those of you who are up on it and Warhammer Total War fans, the single player, we'll have things on gradually, but the single player map and story to begin with will just be based in the province of Reichland.
Okay.
Sort of where Altdorf, the capital, is, and reaching out into Bretonnia. And bits of the neighbouring provinces, and especially southern Midland, which I'll get into that. But it'll just be sort of a small box there. So your factions in that, this is version 1.0. Your factions in that will be the full faction name is the Principality of Reichland. So the Reichland province, basically, which will, for those of you who are into the more artiste. The Warhammer Fantasy, the colours, etc. The colour scheme for them will be white with red shading, which was one of the things they actually got wrong in Warhammer Total War. They sort of did that to appeal to how people think the Empire looks, but it's Reichland and Ghal Franz's faction actually has a white paint job. So they'll be white, and they'll be sort of your stereotypical run-of-the-mill Empire faction. Yeah. Your array of state troops, and by state troops I mean the normal infantrymen. So spearmen without shields. I'll give you some. I'll give you the actual troop charts that we've got. So you've got sort of your spearmen with shields, halberdiers. Halberdiers are the mainstay of the Empire's armies. So lots and lots of halberdiers, swordsmen, crossbowmen, huntsmen or archers, and handgunners. We including this, on the topic of cannons, stuff like handguns will be a big mainstay in the mod. They'll be very, very common. So that's sort of the infantry level. Off of swordsmen, you'll have the ability to upgrade your guys to great swords, which are the elite infantry, almost like your Huskarls from the Nordic Huskarls from Warband, but without the shield, obviously, and a giant two-handed greatsword.
Of course.
On the cavalry front, we want to do mounted pistoliers. So skirmish cavalry, the nobles of the Empire who are on horseback with things like pistols. Outriders, carbine
Can
cavalry.
you be able to get some outriders with grenade launchers in there?
I knew you were going to say that. I've been dreading you saying that. Outriders with grenade launchers. Oh, the amount of time once again it's been brought up. So many people
You
are
just
like,
need the holy hand grenade from NW.
It's so many people have just brought up, and they're like, no, we don't care what you're doing with storylines, mate. Are you going to add stuff like grenade launchers?
And
I'm like,
goblin divers.
It's like, do you not want to know the beauty of the the work going into like the art style? And they were like, no, we just want grenade launchers.
We just need explosions.
If we can code it, likely we will be able to. Then yeah.
Okay.
It'll be rare. We can go into specifics of infantry, which I'll imagine we'll do. It'll be rare, but more content the better. But that's sort of the range cavalry, and then your melee cavalry for Reichland will be mounted swordsmen, which wasn't actually included in Warhammer Total War. It's a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah.
But your standard sort of medium cavalry, mounted swordsmen, and then your Empire Knights on borrowed horses, and then that's the end of the troop tree to begin with. I'll before people start screaming about the Reichsguard, don't worry, I'll go into it. Your next big faction, on the topic of Reichland as well, the leader will obviously be Ghal Maraz, what am I on about? Karl Franz. And he will be on Deathclaw. Don't worry. We are going to include Griffins as mounts.
Cool.
Which will be...
Does that mean we're going to be seeing some sort of Demi-Griff Knights as well?
Yes, I will. I'll get into that. Not necessarily in the first version, but certainly in subsequent versions. But they will be involved in the storyline when we get round to it. But so the capital will be Altdorf. The color will be white and red, and the leader will be Karl Franz. The second main faction, which will be not the rival to Reichland, but certainly the dark horse, will be Midland, but not Midland in the sense of the entire province. It's just the south of Midland, across the Reich, the area around Karabberg and the small towns there. So southern Midland. The lord of the faction won't be Boris Todbringer. Many people will be disappointed by that, but I shall get the gentleman's name up now. Actually, he's got a hell of a name, but it's the Lord of Karabberg. It will be a very for those of you who are up on your lore. The relationship between the city of Karabberg and Midland itself is quite shifty. Like, they really want independence, and their lord is a bit of a whiny psycho in that sense. Ghal Maraz stuff. Where is it? Version 1.0. Southern Midland submarine unit card. Here it is. So the lord of the faction. Oh god. His full name is Duke Leopold von Bildhofen. The Duke of Karabberg. So their faction will be, in a way, in version 1, it will almost be a copy-paste of the Reichland faction, because obviously, as part of as an empire province, the military is roughly the same, but there will be some variations in it. Midland will make stronger use of pikes. They'll have less ranged options, or their ranged options will sort of meld in with each other, so you don't get as much specialized ranged infantry, because they really do put a precedent on melee combat. In future versions, especially with Midland, you'll have things like cavalry, Knights of the White Wolf, so cavalry that wields two-handed battle hammers and things like that. Warriors of Ulrich, so really rabid, fanatical militia. And there will be a lot of wolf pelts. They really do like their wolves. So that's the overview for Midland, and their colour is blue and white, and the capital will be Karabberg in version 1. The main opposition faction, almost the Vegas to the Swadia that is Reichland, going off of Warhammer Total War in this regard, will be the Reichland secessionists. This isn't before people start. Don't freak out. This isn't in the lore. Reichland doesn't have a rebellion in the end times, but it's a very easy way of including an alternative faction in 1.0, and it'll introduce Warhammer Total War players to the mod more. Mm-hmm. So the Reichland secessionists are led by a guy called Rudolf Kleptman. Their capital is a place called Schilderheim, which is one of the minor towns out in the west of Reichland. So that's sort of the secessionist area, very much like Warhammer Total War. And their heraldry, so their colour will be white and brown. Their units will be very military, so you'll have things like Free Company militia and rebel state troops, etc. Hard-hitting, but not as organised as Southern Midland and the Reichland factions. And you won't have as many troop choices as well. You'll have, once again, hard-hitting infantry, good range choices, but it will be in a very disorganised way. So to really emphasise, these guys are starting up a rebellion. In version 1.0, that's the joinable factions. People will likely be annoyed that we're not taking full advantage of the, I think it's 9 or 8 main factions that the Bannerlord single player has. We will, but we won't yet. There are 2 more factions, you could say, that will be included that won't be joinable to begin with, which will be the Orcs and the Beastmen. Going off of the concept of editing the player skeleton, especially for the AI, since I doubt they'd be multiplayer characters to begin with, so we can really polish them off. But there will be gigantic bands of Orcs and Beastmen, almost like moving around. Yeah, moving around in the same way as in Warband, and as they've shown in Bannerlord, you get outlaw bands.
Yeah.
But instead of there being 3, 4, or like 20, there will be several hundred.
All right.
Sort of everywhere from sort of 30, a tiny warband of goblins that the player will be able to take on relatively early game.
What kind of things are you going to be able to gain from these? Because obviously in Warband you've got caravans. You gain resources from these bands of orcs and things. Are you going to get anything specific from them, or is it just someone to fight?
Lots of it's mainly someone to fight. Farm XP is obviously a important factor. They will have coded in them, but there'll be almost a faction. They'll have a horde mechanic, but they'll be their own faction. Like the Beastmen and Orcs will have not bandit layers. They will have actual sort of towns, albeit not towns. The Orcs will have strongholds, and the Beastmen will have sort of glades where forest glades where they gather, and they will siege settlements and raise settlements. So these are 2 factions you'll be constantly at war with. Money is a big thing you'll be able to gain from them. You'll get a lot more money from defeating these warbands than, say, if you're playing Reichland. If you defeat the Reichland secessionists, you'll be able to further your faction's end goal of defeating the rebellion. And obviously you'll gain money and experience from it, but you'll gain far more money if you defeat, like, let's say, an Orc warband who has, in this case, been pillaging and raiding the surrounding area. So you'll also be able to attack and raise their settlements and remove them from the game, but it will be difficult. Mm-hmm. And these warbands will be, in a way, far more dangerous than the armies, because we want to edit the code in a way where the organised factions, so Southern Midland and the secessionists, actually use battle tactics. The AI is not stupid. They'll, as seen in the Bannerlord videos, they'll pick hills, they'll make infantry lines, they'll use their cavalry sensibly. The Orcs and the Beastmen will just horde charge you. Mm-hmm. Not so much the trickle that is in Bannerlord. You'll get a few cav and then the infantry, which is relatively easy to deal with. They'll be in a giant line or in a giant group, and they'll smack into you. which I think will take a lot of people by surprise because they will be difficult. High iron, big models, tough armor, really nasty weapons, high health, high melee damage. It will be difficult for people to tackle. It won't just be the walkover that people may think that it will be.
Yeah.
But you'll get a lot of money, and defeating Orc and Beastmen warbands will also, as I hope to do in the code, up your relationship automatically with not so much everyone on the entire single player map who's at war with them, but people in your faction. So let's say you don't even have to receive a mission from Karl Franz, but let's say you defeat a giant Orc warband near Altdorf, for example, your relationship will improve with Karl Franz and the surrounding lords of Reichland. So it's you can use it as a diplomatic tool. And you can also, if you're really on point and you really want to use them to your advantage, you can almost drive them into your enemy territory, and they'll wreak havoc. For those of you who are the anarchists, you'll likely be able to wear their armor in some cases. You disgusting heretics, you. So if you do want to wield a giant Orc battle axe, then you'll have the ability to do so.
Okay, so all in all, to wrap it up a bit, when Bannerlord comes out, how long do you think it will be before this mod will be ready in a playable state, or are you still just putting together a few ideas?
No, we're actively making the assets now, especially the armors and weapons, etc. It really depends. If Bannerlord doesn't release for another year, which wouldn't surprise me, we'll likely have most of the assets done by then, and then it will just be a case of coding it. And depending on how difficult the coding system is to master and manage, a few months,
okay,
possibly, maybe 3, if we want to really, really polish it off. If it's a difficult coding system, and if we haven't made the assets, like the Empire assets will be easy. We'll be able to almost copy and paste the models that we use to the 2 other Empire factions. That should be easy enough. But if we're stuck on making the Beastmen and Orc equipment, especially doing the skeletons when Bannerlord actually comes out, we'll have to do those factions then. It could be anything up to 6 months. Okay.
So anyway, that's just probably where we're going to leave this interview. If you guys enjoyed this interview, remember to leave a like on this video. And there'll be a link in the description. You do have a ModDB page, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, there'll be a link in the description to the ModDB page if you want to check out some more stuff on the mod. But thank you, Vitalian, for coming and doing this interview.
You're welcome.
I hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you've got any more Bannerlord mods that you'd like me to do interviews on, leave your comments down below. But until then, guys, I will see you in the next one.